Hello world, I am Curtis Simpson, and this is Jectives Typography News number 42. Today is Wednesday, March 25th, 2026. As usual, we have a lot of typography news to get through. If you're watching this before March 28th, don't leave until you hear about the Humble Bundle deal. Not sponsored, but a great deal. I'll get to it in just like a couple minutes. If you don't want to wait, if you're watching the replay, skip the chapters. Trust me, if there's anything you don't want to miss in this episode, that's it. We hit 1,500 subscribers today. That was pretty exciting. Not typography related, but it is, one of those milestones that I feel is worth stopping for a second, saying thank you, and, reflecting, and then moving on. I didn't do Typography News Monday, but I did do a live stream. It was my first live stream of a book review. So I guess we'll just go ahead and I'll go ahead and show you this right now, and then we won't have to talk about it again later. Let me just put this in front of the camera. There we go. It was BLAG. This is a sign painting magazine. This is the only sign painting magazine in print in the entire world. So if you're into that, that's linked in the description. Everything we're going to talk about today is linked in the description. And leading up to that, I had a very nice conversation with Sam Roberts, the editor of the magazine. Likewise, I had a very nice conversation with Carl Inland yesterday about FontBob. So no FontBob news today, but expect some in the coming episodes because I know much more about it now. We've covered FontBob quite a bit in recent episodes. So rundown for today, going to talk about that Humble Bundle deal. There is a design foundry, a designer creating 30 fonts in 30 days, kind of. There was a Dalton Maag, a Dalton Maag article that I was planning to report on today, and it's beginning to shape up to kind of create a little bit of controversy. Started as a joke, but now maybe it's not. I'll get to that. Five new releases to talk about today. I'm just going to be putting these on your radar. I'm not going to be doing deep dives on them, but I do have 3 deep dives to get into after that. 5 new typeface releases from Displaay, Kevin Foley, Daria Cohen, Blaze Type, and Commercial Type. The 3 deep dives that we're going to be doing today are from Kyiv Type Foundry, Off Type, and Comma Type. I do have 2 of them that you can look forward to, one from Lyst Type and one from the Designers Foundry. We talked about them in the last episode of Typography News. They're going to be in the next episode. And then I'll have a Cooper Union video to send you off with. If you don't get enough typography today, or enough typography in this episode, I've got a nice video to send you off with to go watch some more. So without further ado, let's get into the first thing. The thing that I've been saying, don't leave yet. Really. Let me go ahead and switch the screen. There we go. I'll put my face on here for now. There we are. So this is linked in the description. Please go check this out. If you're watching this before Saturday, March 28th, it ends, let's see if the time's on there. It ends in 2 days and 19 hours. Today is the 25th at 7 p.m. where I'm at, 2 plus 19 hours. That is the 28th, midday on Saturday. $18 will get you 20 design books. I know, digital books kind of suck, but I cannot overstate how much value you are getting for this. They're saying $667. I would believe that if it's the actual the sticker price. We know you never pay sticker price. At least usually you don't pay sticker price. But just that book that I have in the background cost more than $18. And if we scroll down, there it is right there. You can get Elliot J. Stock's Universal Principles of Typography along with 19 other books. So I'm going to run through a few of them that I recognize, but please go ahead and take a look at these. Made by James. You'll probably recognize him. We talked about him. He's pretty popular on Instagram and YouTube. But we talked about him quite a bit whenever it came to the Affinity launch because he was one of their he's on some sort of advisory board, but more or less kind of a branded ambassador at this point. But Universal Principles of Design, that's a textbook. Making and Breaking the Grid, another textbook. It's that one, they do have it in schools, but I'm not sure if it's like the textbook anymore. But it is way more up to date than Joseph Mueller-Brockman's grid systems that I've reviewed and wildly popular. It's much more up to date, how would you say this? Yeah, it's much more recent. So it's going to have things that aren't just from like the 60s or whenever Brockman wrote that, the 60s or the 80s. But layout essentials, graphic design reference and specifications book, principles of logo design, industrial design, universal principle of typography, like we talked about, design elements, color fundamentals. I have definitely read that. I can't remember if it was in school or if I bought that on my own later. Universal Principles of Branding, a designer's research manual, 100 faces and figures. So that's a drawing one. There's another drawing comics on here. There's drawing in black and white down there on the bottom right. But you can see graphic design, principles of storytelling for designers, logos that last. That's another one that's incredibly popular. If you were going to go buy that book, you might already own it, but it's still nice to have some of these in digital, just as like the ability to reference these whenever you want, wherever you want. And you can see there are 3 different School of Visual Arts Masters in Branding books there. There's Brands in the Age of AI, The Meaning of Branded Objects, and A History of Brands. So, have I read all of these books? No, but have I read several of these? Yeah, I've read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I've probably read 6 or 7 of these. And I purchased this again, even though I own several of these books. So you can download these in PDF and EPUB. Most of them you can get in both. A few of them you can only get in one or the other. I prefer PDFs because, you know, it's universal. You can open it up everywhere. EPUB, you need an EPUB reader, but, you know, those work a little bit better on Kindle and stuff like that. Yeah, so if you're waiting for this, you can go ahead and exit now. But I really do think this is a great value, and especially for someone who is just getting into design and typography and these kind of things, $18 is such a small investment to get access to these books. If you don't have $18, check your local library. There are a lot of great design books on there. You can get them even online, Libby, Hoopla. I'm sure there are other resources as well. But yeah, so I think this is affordable. If you still can't afford it, check your local libraries for sure. Okay, let's move on because we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The next story here is coming from an independent type foundry. This is Herzberg Design Co. I don't know how to say this name. Mathis, we'll pretend. No, I think the IJ sounds like something. Dang it, I can't remember now. Herzberg Design Co. I saw this posted a few days ago, but I didn't bring it up. I think it's 2 episodes ago, maybe. Yeah, it looks like we're going back 8 or 10 days. 9 days, it looks like. So the first one that I saw was this one here, an Art Nouveau typeface, and he announced it as a font per day for 30 days with like a little asterisk on there that said, like, I'm not crazy, I have a life. I'm gonna do 30 fonts, like a font a day, but it's not really every day. Because that would be crazy. When I first saw this, my initial thought was like, I thought back to how many times I've started 100-day projects and failed miserably. I usually make it to about 30 days before I fail though. So maybe I could make a 30-day one, but designing a new font every day for 30 days, that's a tough challenge to take on. Someone who has completed that challenge several times over though is Remedy667. Nick over there does it every October. He cranks out fonts all the time. Very, very impressive. But you can see he's got 4 of them done here. And I did want to wait to see like how many of them were coming out. Now I think he's kind of broken it down to where it's going to be drawing a font every other day. This is his 4th one, monospaced black letter. But I'm sure we'll come back to this probably closer to the end and report and look at all of them and kind of break it down. Maybe I'll reach out to him and see. I don't want to interrupt him during, so maybe we'll do kind of like a recap towards the end of it, because I'm sure this would be very stressful to try and do, you know, have extra conversations and stuff on your plate whenever you're already doing these very time-consuming tasks. But monospaced black letter, pretty cool. He's doing some really unique stuff here. There are some more plain ones here. He did do, he called it a boring neo-grotesque optimized for text sizes, but still, I mean, it's pretty cool to see the variety and also just to watch these come out. So 4 down, 26 more to go. Best of luck to Herzberg Design Co. I will be looking forward to seeing the final results of this. Our third story today, I was actually going to include this at the end when we get to articles, but it turned into something more than just an article. Or maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll find out. I've reported on Dalton Maag's recast collection before. I think we've done a number of them. We've done Courier recast. Shoot, I can't remember now. We've done, I guess we could just, it doesn't matter that much. We've covered them before. I can't remember which. We did do Letter Gothic, we did Courier. And then I think there was a third one that we covered as well. They announced the next 3 that they're going to be doing this year, but they wrote this nice article here and kind of talked about why they're doing this collection, why this exists. And they've already been doing this for a couple years. I know they've at least been coming out since 2024. But basically, the issue is, I'm just going to let this slow scroll while I blab on here. Let me make my face just a little bit bigger. The issue was, in the 80s, there was like this mad dash to take physical type and turn it into digital. There was the photo typesetting that kind of gets lost in history sometimes, that took place between like metal type and digital type. But in the 80s, digital type was coming about. Linotype was one of the big foundries that was doing a lot of these transitions, or what would you call this? Taking the physical type into digital. And what would be done a lot of times, rather than, create a bunch of different optical sizes like we see foundries doing now, they would find one font, so not like one typeface that would have several fonts in it, one font, one like perfect kind of like average one that could work for everything. They would refer to the metal, gosh, I can't think of what they're called now, like the metal casts, and then they would create the font from that. The thing that Dalton Maag points out in this article is that most of these, if not all of them, ended up pretty thin because they did not account for ink spread or things like that. They were doing these things fast. And if you would have like the metal casting of a font, of a glyph, of a single letter, and you put ink on it, and then you stamped it on paper, that ink spreads. That's why we have ink gaps, or ink traps, I apologize. Ink traps on typefaces. And these typefaces were designed, prior to digital, were designed with that ink spread in mind. A lot of the early ones didn't have that mindset when they created the digital version. So the digital version comes off very thin and very fragile compared to the originals. So when you would look back at old type specimens and instances, fonts in use for these typefaces, they looked better before they were digital. This is no longer the case now, because of people and foundries like Dalton Maag that are, creating revivals of these. And we've seen tons of revivals, but there are still a lot of linotype typefaces used by monotype that have a lot of errors that are never going to get fixed, because why would they do that when people are still buying them? So that's where this collection comes in. They are going back and looking at the print specimens and looking at things to try and make them look as the designers intended. Where's the controversy here? That was my question, because I read this article innocently. I thought it was a fine article. It made sense. There was a couple things I wanted to point at. One is like the ink spread. Two is they noted that with, I'll go ahead and go back to this before we get to the controversy. They did note that a lot of typefaces today, rather than having like, here's a collection of little tiny pieces of metal made to be printed at 12 point, at 16 point, at 24 point, they would, now we just do variable fonts. So you can just have a slider and it's like the optical size. Before, each one of those would be individually, sorry, my phone's ringing and I don't even, I don't know what's going on right now. It's not my cell phone. It's like the apartment phone. So I'm a little distracted. So each one of these individual pieces of metal would be carved differently. And it wasn't like this linear progression that you get now with a variable axis, on your computer. Let me just check my phone. Okay, no text messages, so it must not be too important. So they said like these variable fonts now risk like this sterilization, where it does feel like there's this perfect thing, whereas before, if you had display size, text size, these different things, there wasn't a slider that would perfectly go from one to the other. You would have individual different ones that had different characters and things to them. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to point out was that they noted that these fonts have like basically instant heritage. If you use an old typeface that has existed for hundreds of years, or at least, 50, 60, 80 years, there is a sense of like, oh, this brand already exists in the world. There's a reason that so many people use Futura and Helvetica, and it's not because they're the most legible or even the best fonts. It's that they have this relationship with the past, where you kind of get someone else's street cred when you use that font. So that's the other reason why people might be interested in these recast ones. They're basically better versions from the perspective of Dalton Maag. Dalton Maag sees these as better versions of these historical heritage-based typefaces. Okay, here's the controversy. Maurice Mueller, Maurice posted this on typo.social and said, "Wake up, babe, new Type World controversy just dropped." I think he kind of created the controversy here with this post himself, but I responded, "What's the controversy?" Let's see if we can get to the original. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this a little bit. We'll make it nice and big. Simon Cousins here. He did not have this edited for clarification part on here originally. There's going to be a little bit of back and forth here. I'm going to try to move fast because we need to get to the new releases. But let me get a drink of water. So he posted this, I don't know, joke that I didn't understand. He said, "It's one of those irregular verbs. I recast, you revive. He's being sued for infringement of intellectual property." I don't know what this reference is. He says the Yes Minister series. I don't know if I'm not that old. I don't know if I'm not that, I don't know if this is a UK thing. I don't know. I don't know what this is. And I couldn't be bothered to look it up. He didn't have that clarification on their beginning. The top part doesn't sound like a joke to me. I said, "Oh, okay, thanks for the clarification." So then I messaged him and I said, because I looked to try to find like, where are they being sued at? Who's suing them? What's happening here? No one is. That's the first thing you should know. No one is suing Dalton Maag, at least not right now. But I messaged him because I said, like, I can't find any sources for this. Can you expand on this so that I can understand what's going on? And then he updated this here to say that there is no one suing them that he knows of. Looks like Doug Wilson here also asked for a source on the statement. Maybe he didn't see the quote unquote joke. But so that goes by, and I think, okay, like it's there is no controversy here. It's just kind of like a joke, haha, whatever. But then Retype Foundry just 3 hours ago linked to this where Typo Foundry, I forget, Jean-Francois Pochet, posted and asked, and he said, legitimate question, Adrian Friediger drew Universe in 1957. He died in 2015. Universe was created in France, and its author enjoys copyright protection up to 70 years after his death. Moral rights as a right of exploitation. I'm not sure what that means. Have you obtained permission from the Friediger succession? So I didn't see anywhere that they were doing a Universe revival on here, but I did have that same question about other typefaces because they are doing all of these revivals and they just use the real name. So let's go ahead and find the recast collection here. Shoot, we probably should have looked up this before. Let's just do this. Dalton Maag recast. Oh, here's Bookman recast. Okay. So there are a bunch of different recasts. Shoot. Anyway, they call them by the real names. They call them Bookman, they call them Haas, they call them Courier. And I was wondering, like, I don't know. I think a lot of these, the copyright would be expired on them. But I was wondering, like, how are they getting away with just calling these by the original names and adding recast to the end of it? And my assumption was that they're doing the same thing as Futura does, and they're licensing the name from other places. I don't know. Is there a controversy? Is there not? This will be a developing story. I think it's probably not. And I think that in the end, this probably is just, I don't know, nonsense. But there is like a real question because most revivals don't use the name unless it's been a really long time. You know, if there's like a Libre Baskerville or Libre Franklin or one of these fonts that's like literally 300 or 400 years old, fine. Some of these fonts are not quite that old though. And Jean-Francois brings up a question about Universe. So I'm not sure if they're doing a Universe recast, but that seems to be what he is implying here. I don't know what this means. I just thought that I would put it on your radar because it's one of those weird things that came up after I was already going to report this. But let me get a drink of water. We'll move on to new releases, and we'll have some more fun and get out of the controversy. I am going to take my face off for this so that I'm not in the way. There we go. So our first of 5 new releases this week. These are not going to be deep dives. These are not going to be reviews. These are just putting these on your radar, and we will do deep dives on some of these and reviews on some of these in the future. This one right here, for sure, we are doing. This is Display's Panell, and they always spell their fonts with 2 of the wrong letters. So you can see, not always, I guess, but like you can see concrete with 2 L's there, or 2 T's, I apologize. Bagos, Aguzo, Felix, not all of them, but a lot of them do have 2 letters in there when they are not needed. So I think this is pronounced Panell. They describe this as being similar to Eurostyle, Microgramma, Compacta, Earth. Earth was a font that I was not familiar with, and it's actually not a font that you can get anywhere. Maybe there's a revival somewhere, but it's one of those typefaces that was used and not a lot of people I'm not sure we're certain on the provenance of it. But you can see it comes in 4 styles, or 4 weights, I apologize, 4 weights plus italic. But the crazy thing about this is that there are 4 different, can I unhighlight this? There are 7, so there are 4 different weights, but there are 7 different widths, which is crazy. I don't think I've ever seen a font with more widths than there are weights, but here we are. I'm really, really excited to dig into this one. Maybe this will get done on Friday when we do Serica and Spinello. I think that would be a good 3 typeface combo. But you can see there are 14 stylistic sets, 10 figure sets, and 4 other features. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see if you go to their website and you click these things, you get some extra long terminals on these. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so I think this is going to be pretty fun to dig through and play with all the alternates and everything. But we're going to go ahead and stop there with this one. This was Display's new release, and it is called Panell. Next up, we have Herald News. Let me go ahead and load this. I'm going to redo that part for the chapter watchers. So next up we have Herald News. This is our second new release, and Kevin Foley. This is a new Foundry for me. Kevin Foley is apparently, I was not familiar. His bio is pretty cool. He seems like a cool dude. He is not new to the graphic design industry. He's very much a veteran, spent 25 years in Japan running an independent graphic design studio, but is a more recent graduate of type at Cooper. So he became a type designer, well after he was an established graphic designer. And this typeface here originally began when he was in the program at type at Cooper. So Herald News here, we can see what this is. It's a publishing font, and I really, really like these specimens. They're very much understated, and I think that is underappreciated sometimes. The flashy specimens get a lot more attention. I'm guilty of it as well. They get your attention. You look at them a little more, but this one here is very practical. This shows you what the use cases would be. It's not trying to pretend it's something else. I think that's the best way to do this. The best way to use your specimens are to show it in a real world example, how it would actually be used. And this looks pretty great. I will say, since we're probably not going to do a deep dive on this, I will say my one gripe with this one here is that it doesn't have italics. So while this does look like it would be an amazing workhorse typeface, and it's got a lot of great features on it, you can see all of these right here. Case sensitive punctuation, ligatures. If we go back a second, it's got fractions, superscript, subscript, tabular figures, all of the stuff that you would want in a workhorse typeface. But I think you're really going to struggle trying to use this as a workhorse, especially in a publication or something like this, if you don't have any italics. What are you going to do in the middle of this block of text if you need to put, I don't know. I don't think you want to do an underline. I don't think you want to do bold. I think you want italics. Sometimes you just want italics. I think the non-negotiables are, you need a regular weight, you need an italic weight, and you need a bold. I think you also need a bold italic, but you at least need those 3 for any font. So this one looks incredible and the specimens look great, but I do think to be truly a utility typeface as it's being advertised here, I do think that it needs italics, but I think this is beautiful, and I'm very glad that I found Kevin Foley's fonts here. Brand new Foundry for me, not a brand new Foundry, but maybe it's new for you too. I am gonna wait until I load this one up before I give my little call out. Here we go. Our third new typeface to this week is I always say this wrong. I always say Superfluous. Superfluous. Our third new release this week is from Daria Cohen. This is Superfluous. We have talked about Daria here on the channel before because she is on Future Fonts. Let's go ahead and see what other ones she's released on here. There you go. 4 different typefaces on here. Superfluous by Daria Cohen. And this one is perfectly named. Let me see. I got a dictionary definition here. Superfluous is exceeding what is sufficient or necessary, and this is 100% exceeding what is sufficient or necessary. You can see all of the ornamentation, all of the flourishes. This looks like it's going to be so much fun to play with. I do have the trial version of it right here, and you can as well. Link is in the description, as well as every other new release we're talking about. Links are in the description. None are sponsored. They are just there for your convenience. But I think this looks so much fun. And since it's on Future Fonts, typically a pretty great license on here. You can see you're going to get desktop, web, and app for $44. And with these... with Future Fonts, as they get developed, as they expand, as they update, you get all the updates for free. So it's a win-win for everybody. You get to support independent type design and help a typeface get finished, and they get some funding upfront before they finish the typeface, so that they can, buy food and keep making new fonts. So she says, this is the initial release. Let's see where it goes. What's next? Further exploration and refinements of the superfluous hair. So I'm really excited to watch this one develop, and I do have the trial font for this. I'm not sure if we'll do a deep dive on it, but it's a great new release this week, and I'm very excited for it. It looks really, really cool. It's not like anything I've seen, that's for sure, and it definitely matches the title, Superfluous. Okay, let's see. We've got 2 more new releases here. 2 more quick ones, and then we're going to do 3 reviews. Our third new release here, and let me just point out, because we did highlight Blaze Type's new website. Look at that, the video works now. I had autoplay turned off when I reviewed this website, or I didn't actually review this website. I said I needed more time to review it, but when I first landed on this website, there was just a blank page right here. That's because there's an auto playing video here, which I hate. This one looks pretty cool, but I have autoplay videos turned off on my browser so that I never have to deal with those terrible news stories where you're reading an article and they start playing a video in the middle of it. But this is what should have showed up at the top of their webpage. Same thing with another webpage we're gonna get to today. But this video is pretty freaking cool, and I am a little sad that we missed out on it the first time around, but we're getting to see it right now. So new website, new video there, have autoplay turned on if you wanna see this cool video on their homepage. But the new release that we're going to look at today is Lyst. Once again, not a deep dive, just going to take a quick peek at this, and you can see it. Let me see if I got a number here. 27 styles, and it is a variable font. This looks pretty nice. I forget the trial on this. There is a trial available, but it does have limited characters, so not sure if we'll do a deep dive on this one or not, but it does look pretty cool. Nice serif typeface here. Pretty high contrast. It looks a little condensed, and it seems like there are a lot of weights for it. The one thing that I want to point out, just in case we never do a deep dive on this, I don't think I've ever seen this before. Okay, we've got the regular weight, we've got the oblique weight. Typically you don't see obliques in a serif typeface. Obliques are just slanted versions. Can you see that on the right? They're slanted versions of the Roman. Typically you see this more so with sans serifs because you don't have all of this extra like cursive-ish stuff that comes with. Let's see if we can get a bigger alphabet on this. So this is extra bold. We've got black right here. This is black oblique. And then we've got black italic can you see how much more, I know it's not actually cursive, but how much more, I don't know, penmanship or something like goes into this, how much more different it is from the regular black to the black italic. It's almost like a completely different font. We call these true italics. So they're not just slanted characters, they're completely redrawn. But this typeface actually comes with regular, oblique, and italic. So there are 9 different weights here, 3 different styles, or 3 different styles, slants. Not something I've seen before. That is Lyst from Blaze Type. And our final new release is coming from Commercial Type. So this is the 5th and final new release before we get into the reviews. This is Goldscheider, I think is pronounced. Goldscheider. They've also got this referred to as Goldscheider titling. This is being released quietly through their vault section of the website. So I reached out to them and asked because I saw that this was released kind of, but I couldn't find any like promotion for it. This is their vault. And they quietly release typefaces on here. If you click into the descriptions of these, most of the time you'll see that these were created for something very specific. A lot of these were created for magazines or some kind of publication. So if we go down to Goldscheider titling right here, we go to the description, we can see that Christian Schwartz drew this version for Nick Vogelson for the 2020 nameplate for Document Journal. Let me go ahead and pull that up for you. Oh, that is not the right one. That is the Wikipedia. But let me go and show you the media here. They have a picture of it right here. It was used for the masthead right here. If you go to the website, the publication actually shut down at the end of 2025, at the start of 2026. So they've got articles and stuff on there. They're still using the typeface, but there hasn't been anything new written since December 2025. So let's get back to it right here. It's all caps. That's what, it's a titling font. It was made to write titles. So I don't know if this is going to be for anyone, but the thing that I think is interesting about these typefaces that were created for bespoke use cases is that there might very well be someone out there that could use this exact thing for its exact purpose. And you know that it's perfectly designed for a publication, for titles, but you don't have to pay the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars that were shelled out to get this original typeface made. You can get this for $50 on desktop. And, it's got alternates here where you're raising and lowering the crossbar on the A. What's this one doing? This one's doing a wide H on it, a more open P. So you can see the bottom of that P, hopefully, is open up there. But there are a lot of great, little touches and things like that. And you're coming from a respected, a high quality type foundry, commercial type, and a renowned type designer, Christian Schwartz. I don't think you're, I don't think you can do much better than that for $50, but it's not, it's not going to do everything. It's made for what it's made for, one very specific use case, but I do think that might work for someone. So while it's not some big flashy announcement, and while it's not entirely a new typeface, this came out in 2020, it just became available to the public as this magazine went out of business in 2026. So that is Goldscheider from Commercial Type, and you can find that in the vault section of their website. I'm gonna get a drink of water, and we're gonna get into some new releases, or some reviews of new releases. So let me give a quick, that is the thumbnail. Let me give a quick preview of what we're gonna be looking at in the next episode, and that is gonna be Spinello by Lift Type. This looks really, really fun. And Serica by the Designers Foundry. I did reach out to them this week and had some conversations with them, and I learned a little more about the fonts. I got access to a review license for Serica. Spinello already has a full font. Oh no, this one's a review license too. I apologize. So I did get review license for Spinello and Serica from Lift Type and the Designers Foundry, respectively. But I just haven't had enough time to like really dig into these and give them their due. As you can see, these have huge glyph counts on them. 1,900 glyphs on Spinello with 44 open type features. Serica here, a pixel font with 1,150 glyphs and 28 open type features. These need a little bit of time to get through, but I did mention these in the last episode as new releases, so I wanted you to know I'm going to get to these as deep dives and reviews in the next episode. But today, we are going to start out with KTF Roman from Kyiv Type. We did look at this page here before, but I'm just going to review it real quick for anybody that missed the last episode of Typography News. KTF Roman is an expansion of KTF Metro, which you can actually get for free. I don't think I have that linked in this episode, but it's linked in the last one, and you could just go on their website and look for KTF Metro. There was a series of 5 typefaces, and you can see here it was a part of the Kyiv Metro. Oh, there it is. There's the link right there. So if you go to it, you can link to it right in this one. I do have KTF Roman linked. So it's an expansion of that. We're going to look at that in Affinity here in a second, just compare them. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background on this. This was developed originally for the red line, I think they said. Shoot, where is... okay, KTF Roman reinterprets the cast metal letters of Kyiv Metro as a contemporary display family. That's the main takeaway here. These were designed by an architect. It's unknown who the actual designer was. They found these in like old blueprints and old documents, and they were made to be carved like this. They were made to be engraved, cast metal lettering. So when it was originally designed for the Metro font bundle, it looked like this, and it was just, you know, a flat typeface, and that looks nice. It released, and you can get this for free, full license, 303 glyphs. It actually has 455 characters. Typically, we see that being the opposite, where characters are bigger than glyphs, but I wanted to point this out because Kyiv Type Foundry always includes Cyrillic. So you've got some glyphs that can work in both Cyrillic and Latin. So that's why those are abnormally, you know, in the opposite direction. Has 8 open type features on this. But KTF Roman here comes in 5 styles. We talked about this last week, but I'll go ahead and give you another preview here. We're going to come back to this page, but it comes in Shadow, Roman, Outline, Black and White, and Color. So you're getting 4 completely new ones, and the Roman is also refined and expanded on its own as well. 417 glyphs on this one. You can see the count there. 457 characters, 11 open type features. So it's been expanded all around. And last episode, I marveled over this color font and said that it looked like stained glass windows to me. I know that it's supposed to be, you know, cast metal, but there's something about these colors. I really think this is a great color combination. If you don't like this, you know, you could always use DJR's color font customizer to go in and swap these out. But we looked at these up close last time. I don't want to, you know, spend too much time just ogling how beautiful. I never know if it's ogling or ogling, but just staring and drooling at how good these look. One thing I did want to point out, because I think I might have misspoke last week and said these were inspired by Walter Ketch type design. They're not, just the numbers are, and these are going to be important when we look at other Roman typefaces. There's nothing that's like a direct parallel to this. If you know of something closer than the examples that I'm showing, go ahead and let us know in the comments so we can all learn a little bit. This font feels familiar, but I can't put my finger on what it feels like. And you know, it feels like a transitional serif typeface, but I can't 100% figure out what it is that it reminds me of. So here is the comparison to the free typeface, Metro Roman. You can see it's a little bit bigger, but there's also some refinements in the serifs and stuff like that. You know, if you go from left to right here, you can see that the serifs have been expanded a little bit. That's a little, I mean, that's kind of to be expected if you're just making the typeface bigger overall. But I do think there are some more refinements other than just like that slight increase in size taking place here. You can see some of the angles here of the serifs, the terminals. But overall, the vibe is, you know, pretty similar. This one here, the J is a good example. You can see the height of the J is, the length of the J there is about the same, but the height of it here is a little bit bigger and all the proportions are maintained. So you can see it's more than just making the font bigger. Otherwise, this would really expand there. So that's that. It does come in 5 different styles here. And obviously they started with the Roman. We just saw that with Metro Roman. But The shadow, you know, this is fun. You see this a lot in old specimen books. You don't see this a lot now. You don't see shadows, probably because you can do a drop shadow on any font you want, but it is nice to have that included, especially in programs and situations where you can't do a shadow easily, or whether we know where it might get broken depending on what browser or what software or whatever it is. It's nice to have a shadow font like that. So these bottom two were developed through the outline version. So the outline version was created first, and you can see this would give you all of those lines. And from there, they built the black and white version. I kind of really like this black and white version. It feels really classy. I mean, the color one is a lot of fun for sure, but the black and white one, it's just got like a really, really elegant vibe to it. I don't know if this is necessarily supposed to be super elegant, you know, it's a Roman transitional typeface, and it's all caps, but yeah, they've all got their own place. That's one of the great things about this. Here is the main thing I want to focus on today, though. Look at this absolute truckload of ligatures. A lot of times on the channel, you'll see me when I go through a typeface, and I'll give you like, I'll do it live and I'll show you like, oh, look at these ligatures it has. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And I'll click through some of the OpenType features. I had to prepare this before because there are way too many to do live. Some of these are Cyrillic, some of these are Latin, but look at all these ligatures. A-E, A-L, A-N. You got an actual and right here. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a typeface with more ligatures and actually like useful ones. You know, you'll see some of these editorial typefaces that have like the wild swashes that connect like, I don't know, a Y to a Q or something crazy like that. But like these are, oh, I got a couple of repeats in there. I apologize for that. These are wild, and I don't know. It's particularly impressive because you would have to do all of these outlines and all of this this metal casting, detailing and stuff like that on every single one of these. And you can't just take the E and shrink it down. You have to make sure that the line work still works on it, because this E is so much smaller. It should be the same size as the L. So these lines inside of here still have to work even at that smaller size. I don't know. I'm really, really impressed by this. You can see the THE. I think that's supposed to be a the. Is that a the ligature? That looks pretty freaking cool. Yeah, this is wild. And you get to especially crazy ones like this with the O-E ligature, and like you're shoving those on there, and somehow it still works. I don't know. I'm really, really impressed by this. And, you know, I don't know that all of these are showcased on the website, but yeah, I do not think that you will be disappointed with your purchase when it comes to the ligatures that are included in this. Very easy to use in any regular design software. And it's got all the numbers and everything like that too. Like I said, this has 417 glyphs in it. I could not put my finger on another Roman typeface. You know, obviously the most famous font with Roman in it is probably Times New Roman. And it's, you know, it's not super far off. But you can see there's a lot more contrast in Times New Roman than there is in KTF Roman here. But there are a lot of similar elements. You know, you've got your bracketed serifs. So if we look at the H here, we can see the brackets on the serifs. You got a nice thin crossbar there. The crossbar here has quite a bit more heft to it. It has a lot more, you know, a lot less contrast. And that probably comes down to its original creation. You're going to have less contrast because you're metal casting this in giant letters that are going to go in the Metro. It just makes sense that it's going to need to be a bit thicker and, you know, a little stronger. But you can see some overlapping elements in here. So I think that Times New Roman, you know, if for some reason your base typeface for your brand was Times New Roman, I think KTF Roman would be an incredible way to like boost your, what would you say? To like boost your headlines, boost your display typeface. You could use this, you could use these 5 different versions here to like do headlines, I think you could do a logo with this, do all kinds of different interesting things, and then, you know, revert back to Times New Roman or something similar to that your workhorse. I think that would be an excellent use case for this. The one thing I wanted to point out here, I've also got Libre Baskerville and Adobe Castellan Pro on here. They're not, they're not as close as Times New Roman, but there are some interesting elements and stuff like that. These are transitional serif typefaces. So I wanted to throw these on here and, kind of let you see where my head was at when I made that statement. But you can see there's not a lot of overlap between these, especially when you get into the brackets on these. This one actually is Castellan, might be a humanist serif. I apologize. But you can see the bracketed serifs on Baskerville here. The one thing I wanted to point out, though, was these numbers, because I mentioned that these were inspired by Walter Ketch. And you could see they are unlike any of the other Romans on this page. So you see Times New Roman, pretty traditional numbers. We've seen these a million times. if you used any word processor or web page from like the 90s to 2010, you have seen these numbers a million times. Baskerville and Castellan, a little bit more ornate, not necessarily ornate, but a little bit more flourish in the Libre Baskerville here. And we've got some flags. We've got a flag on the 5 here, and we've got some extra serifs on the 2 and the 7. A little more contrast and stuff like that. But these are just completely different. And when you look at them in this context, they do kind of stand out as being different. But when we pull them all together, up here, I think they fit fine, in context with this, especially when you pull out the Q. So let me go ahead and just type a Q in here next to this 3. If you get oh my goodness, what did I do? If you get the Q here next to the 3, you can see this kind of tail coming down, and you can see the 3 coming here. Like, this feels appropriate. It doesn't feel out of place, even though it feels so different compared to what the other Romans are doing. So I think that's pretty interesting. I've never seen, you just don't typically see these types of figures paired with this type of font. But there's not anything else out there like KTF Roman. So I don't know, just another quirk, another characteristic, another feature that you're going to get with this typeface. So we're not going to be doing super deep dives today, but that is KTF Roman. Let me go ahead and read you some stats in case I missed anything. Kyiv type Foundry, 5 styles like we saw, color font, and you could recolor this elsewhere. 417 glyphs, 11 open type features. Purchase this from the Foundry for 315 euros on desktop. It does have a trial, but they're going to be limited characters, so you could definitely type out this right here, but you wouldn't be able to test out all of these ligatures. So those are not included in the trial, but it's got a standard license on it. I think you would be happy with this if it fit your needs. Let me get a drink of water, and we will move on to the next typeface. This next one here is coming from Type. This is radio. I just wanted to go ahead and show you this to you here in Affinity, because this is where we were. But let me go ahead and open up the web page, and I will show you a few neat things real quick. CMM radio. This is linked in the description, this link that I'm clicking on right now. Type CMM radio. And last episode on Friday, I said, there's a blank spot right here. This is how I figured out that I had autoplay turned off. I don't know that we were necessarily missing anything. I mean, this is kind of like a cool little animation. But we didn't miss out on anything huge. You've got the circle there, which kind of alludes to the geometric sans serif that we're about to dig into. But just a refresher from last week, CMM Radio is a geometric sans serif font tuning modernist aesthetic to contemporary needs by reimagining the classic Futura typeface with legibility and inclusivity in mind. So this is the inclusivity last week. Inclusivity last week. I made a comment like I'm not sure what that means, but we're gonna find out. And Anna Cairns here, the founder and the designer of this typeface, reached out to me and explained that. We're gonna get into it, and I will show you those inclusive letters when we get into Affinity. You can see on the right here, these are early Futura designs. If you own, oh gosh, I can't think of what his name is. Maybe I don't want to say the wrong name, but if you own the Paul Renner book, You will be familiar with these because there are some great specimens included in the center of that book. But you can see all of the wild versions that were in the early designs of Futura. A lot of these got scrapped, but Radio has brought several of them back to life here and introduced some brand new ones of their own. I am going to compare this to Futura, so don't worry. The elephant in the room will be addressed, and you will see how the two stack up head to head, along with some other options, that have evolved out of Futura. I stopped on this last week. I'm going to stop on it again. I think that these are really cool specimens, and it's always nice to stop and give foundries their flowers when they do neat things like this, because that they spent time agonizing over all these little details, and most of us are just going to scroll by this pretty quick, either on our on social media or on the Foundry webpage here. But look at all of these alternates. She did mention that these were expanded upon after the last episode, so there are even more here than we looked at last time. We are going to get into these in Affinity though, so don't worry about that. She's pointing out some things here, comparing it next to Futura, some legibility and stuff like that. But we're going to go ahead and get into Affinity, because I do think having hands-on is the best way to do this. This is going to be the deepest dive we do today. This font has 33 OpenType features, and we're going to look at damn near every single one of them. But 603 glyphs on this one. You can see I've got some extra characters already on the screen because I didn't want to waste any time. I want to get into these. This is a variable font. The variable that you are supposed to use is the italic. There is a super secret variable axis on here that I'm going to show you. So we'll get a little bit of an exclusive here on Objective Typography News. I didn't even mention this to Anna, so hopefully she's not too bothered by this. Let's start out with the italic though, because this is the axis that we are supposed to see. And you will see nice and smooth italic axis on the variable font. You don't see a lot of italic axes on typefaces, mainly because, if it's a true italic, at least, you just can't do this. You would get a lot of weird popping. There would just be so much different. It's like the Lyst typeface that we looked at earlier. The true italics are different. This is a sans serif, so you're going to kind of get more of obliques. I still call them italics a lot of times, but they are technically obliques when they get slanted like this. But that's pretty cool, because you could do some animation type stuff with it, but also you can kind of set your italic somewhere in the middle. If you want it to be right here, you can stop right there. If you want it slanted all the way, you can go all the way. Let me give you a preview of something that we do not have access yet to. This only has two different styles right now. It has the regular and it has the italic. And then, the stuff in between. Here's the thing that we aren't supposed to have access to. If I click in Affinity, show hidden axis right here, we get a weight axis. It was noted on the website that later in 2026, weights will be added, this will be expanded, but we can get a preview of what that might look like right here. Do not take this as gospel. Do not think that this is what the finals will look like, because we are not supposed to have this axis right here. We are not supposed to be able to see these weights, and yet we can. This is not a review license. This is the trial license. Type lets you have full trial license, including the variables. So you can do this if you have Affinity. But look at that. I think that looks pretty good. And you can even pair it up with the italics there. Like I said, I don't know that all of these characters here are going to be in the final version. I don't know how much of this is going to change. But we're getting a little bit of a preview of what's to come later this year with these weights. And I think that it's off to a great start. And it looks pretty nice. So in the future, this will have two variable axes, one for the weight, one for the italics. Right now, it's just got the italics. Let me go ahead and show you some of these features. I'm going to open up the typography panel here in Affinity and click on this. So you can see I've got some characters already on there. We're going to start out though with making some of these interesting, these interesting squared off, boxed off characters. These were inspired by the original Futura designs. But if you want something a little more traditional, if you click on arched letter forms, there we go. you can see they've got the typical arches. See the M, the, A, the N, the R there. Click, click. You can see we're getting more traditional forms there. I'm going to show all these all at once, but I do think it's important to kind of go through and look at these one by one. And you might notice on Affinity there is a bug right now, and I can't perfectly see these checkboxes in light mode right now. In dark mode, they work fine, but this is a bug that was introduced. These are the inclusive letter forms. A lot of times you would see these labeled as like hyper legible or something like that, but we're getting little tails on some of these. And what that does is that helps, differentiate your Q from your P for anything that might get mirrored, differentiates your L from your 1. See the 1 right there. And it's also doing some things that we don't typically see. If you see over there on the right, we're seeing the 9 change. So you've got the 9 and the 6, and it just makes it so that it's very, very different between the 9 and a 6 there. Stylized letter forms. This is where things start to get pretty wacky, pretty weird. And they even made me misread a word on here last week. I'm going to go ahead and point this out. There was a word right here that's supposed to say long band, and I read this as long board. You can see that this does not, this is not the hyper legible. This is not the inclusive one. It is basically on a spectrum. We're going to look at that here in a second as well, but these are the stylized letter forms. Let's go ahead and get radio on here too, just so we can get all of it. So these are the stylized letter forms right here. And you can see we're getting the A, the B, the D, the G, where it's popping out this little crossbar that would never exist, but it's pretty fun. I think we're also getting on the P and the Q here as well. So these are the stylized ones. I don't think there's anything in the uppercase that it's happening to, but it's happening in those lowercase there with the ascenders and descenders that have the perfect bowls hooked to them. We've got an alternate asterisk. I think this is one of the other inclusive things. So the inclusive stuff isn't only related to being more legible. You could use this asterisk here for the gender star. We had a conversation about that when I was doing my review of the 3rd edition of Thinking with Type by Ellen Lupton. And, there's some controversy surrounding this, like, is it useful, is it not? But for people that want to use this, it hurts no one to have this in the font, and now people that want to use it can use it. So I have absolutely no problem with that. I think that's a very nice inclusion. You can see the A right here. She's calling this the school book A, and it's got a little tail on it. I'm going to show you this paired with the other inclusive letters that have the tails on them. But before we leave the A, we've also got the 2-story A. I do think that's probably the most legible one, the 2-story A. This one, the nice tail would match the tails that we could include on these inclusive letter forms. So I think that one matches these L's here. If you're not, and the D as well, if you're not too worried about being hyper legible, if you just want to have a nice little tails on your letters, you can include the A on that one. And then we've got the alternate geometric. So this one is one of those original Futura designs, one of the early sketches and stuff like that never really made it mainstream. So you've got 4 different A's here to choose from. We've got the standard, we've got the alternate school book with the tail on it, we've got the 2-story, which is a little more legible, and then we've got the 2-story alternate geometrical A, she's calling this one, the 2-story geometric A. I'm not sure if it's ever been done before. I'm not sure it'll be ever done again, but there it is. We've also got some interesting stylized G here, almost like an upside down 8. That's really interesting. And then we've got the alternate H here. So this alternate H actually matches the default M and N pretty well. So if you wanted those to match, you could do all arched if you went with the arched ones here, or you could do all of them flat if you did this alternate for the H there. So I think it's nice that all of these are included in here. Like I said, a lot of features on here. This here could also very well help with the legibility, this little tail on the J. I kind of like this even better than the typical Futura J that's just straight down. Got an alternate L here, we saw that one. So you can do each of these individually. And we've got an alternate R. This is called the stick and ball, or stick and, yeah, I think it's the stick and ball is what a lot of people call this, where you've just got the dot and the line. You can see immediately why this isn't, more common. In in certain contexts, you would definitely know what that is, but it could definitely create some issues for legibility. So this is the standard one right there. You've got the you've got the arched version that gives you a more traditional R, and then you've also got this alternate with the stick and ball that was from the original sketches. Got an alternate T with the tail on it. We've got an alternate Y that comes right down the middle. Let me go ahead and show the original. There's the original. There's the alternate. And lastly, we have an alternate uppercase M. So if you don't like this big splayed M, you can get one that's a little more like, I don't know, Avenir or Gotham or something like that. One of these Futura evolved geometrics typefaces. So if you wanted to squish your letters, kern them a little bit closer together, we've got the M and the N here. If you wanted to kern these really, really tight, that's a lot easier to do with a letter like this compared to the splayed M. You know, you can get them much, much tighter. So let me show you just a few more things while we're here. I've already had the alternate commas and stuff on there. You see these quote marks here. Maybe it's better to do it over here. We can see the comma and the quote at the same time. Comma and the quote top and bottom there. You can get the little, you get the little ball on there if you do it this way. Here's the one reason why I said I don't know if these are going to be the real weights, because when we expand this, you can see these get, it doesn't maintain the contrast. Maybe that is intentional. I could see that being the case, because then it would help not make that just like one big blob there. But I didn't talk to Anna about this, so I'm not sure if those are going to, if these are what the quotation marks and the comma here are actually going to look like at these heavier weights when that's released later this year. But it's pretty interesting either way. I kind of like it. I kind of like the way that it expands there. Last thing to look at here are the numbers. So we've got proportional numbers. That's the default. We've got tabular numbers, so that would work great for a spreadsheet. And you notice that slash in the middle there. That's because this does the kind of fractions that I love, and that is that you can make any number a fraction if you put the slash between it, and you can see it automatically puts the numbers before that on top and the numbers after it on the bottom. So it's not just a select set of numbers for the fractions. You can do any fraction that you want, and you don't have to do the extra headache of setting like, the denominator, numerator, denominator, and then putting slash between it. Just hit the fraction button there and it will do it for you. One last thing in the numbers here, you'll note that this slash seems pretty low below the baseline. That is because it's set for lowercase. So let me go ahead and show you this right here. See how nice and neat that looks in the lowercase right there. But if you were to do this on numbers, or you were to do this on uppercase, boom, see how much it sits below the baseline there? If we switch this to case sensitive, if we switch this to case sensitive, then you get them to line up much, much nicer. So then they match the case that you're in. There you go. And that is all not 33, because some of these are like kerning and stuff like that. But that is all of the features that I'm going to show you right now. I lied. We got a /0. Boom. There you go. There's some more legibility. There's some more inclusivity. A ton of features packed into this. When you see the price tag for this one, you are going to be, I think, quite shocked at all that you're getting for the value with this one. Okay, just to kind of wrap things up between these different characters and stuff that we looked at, because we looked at a lot of stuff individually, but she mentioned to me this is kind of a spectrum going from inclusive down to stylized. So I went ahead and did my own version of what I think that these would look like if I was grouping them. And if I wanted to be these to be the most inclusive, I would probably do the two-story A right here, the lowercase a. I'd probably add tails to stuff because I think that that's inclusive. I would definitely do the rounded letters on here. So I do the rounded M, N, and R and break from the default. I'd add the tail to the T as well. I would probably make the M like this. I don't know if that's actually the most inclusive, because I think the splayed would probably be even more distinct, but I like that one. I didn't put the /0 on there, but if you were really wanting it to be the most inclusive, you'd put the /0 on there as well. This is the default right here. We've looked at this already. You can see it's got the unique M, N, R on this and the splayed M. Okay, we're used to that. And then we go down to the stylized here. I believe that the top letter, the top row there, the uppercase, they're all going to be the same. But when we get to the stylized, we get as far away from inclusive and legible as possible with those lowercase letters that have ascenders and descenders with the bowls on them, with the perfect circles. So those are those. Let's compare this. Like I said, there's an how old is Futura? 100 years now. Let's compare this 100-year-old elephant in the room, and that is Futura. Futura 100 released last year, and I mentioned this last time about how you can get Futura 100. Their goal is to make the most Futura that's ever existed and make it super authentic to the original, and then expand it into basically every language on the planet. I apologize. This is not what CMM radio is. This is not what Comatype set out to do. It's not what Anna set out to do. She's making this for modern times. She's not trying to keep it as it was 100 years ago. She's trying to make this a better version of Futura, a more fun version of Futura, a more inclusive version. So here is the original. I'm going to go ahead and compare Futura to the standard radio. Radio is in red on top there, and you can see how they compare. Immediately, you'll notice the ascenders and descenders are quite long compared to radios. There are a lot of differences here. Futura was actually set in like the, oh gosh, I can't think of what it's called now. It was set in like the Roman, like the Trajan columns type style. Man, I feel so dumb not being able to tell you what this is called right now. But it's not proportional. It's like a traditional ratio. So you can see how wide the A is, how wide like the G is, but then how small the F and the E and the S are, and the P and the R. You can see how skinny those are. And that's one of the things that's great about Futura. You've got this weird, bouncing from like a big O to a small P to a big Q to a small R. That can be appealing, but it can also be distracting. So you can see what happens here is that these are much more, much more proportional. The O is still big, the Q is still big, but the P, the R, and the S, they're not as much, there's not as much like throwing you off. You can see how these compare. They're similar, but that differentiation between like the skinny letters and the wide letters, they're much more similar. You can even see here how wide the A is compared to the B there. The A and the B here are pretty similar. That's the first thing to note. The next thing to note is the terminals here. So the way that this C ends right here, you see how it's got an angle right there? It's following the stroke. So it ends in the direction of the stroke. One of the defining things of Futura is this C right here that's chopped off vertically. Why would you do this? Because in German, you put a CH next to each other quite often, and you want to be able to stick these together like that. But in terms of legibility, in terms of like, modern typefaces, this is a little bit nicer. I would agree that this, while it can look cool, it looks very Futura. You immediately know it's Futura when you see that. These more open counters, I think this is better for legibility. I think it just, it feels more relevant now. It feels more modern. So I'm not going to go through every single letter that's on here, but you could probably go through and notice quite a few changes, particularly in the ascenders, descenders, and then with the widths and the way that the counters are a little more legible, a little more open. And you'll note too with the M here, you've got these really sharp points on the top and bottom. That's another defining characteristic. But if we're making Futura for now, we don't need those giant points sticking out of the top and bottom of the baseline. Let's have something a little more, a little more rational here. Okay, so if you wanted to make it more like Futura, could you do that? Yeah, you could. You could get rid of the squared off M, N, and R, and you can get something that's a little more traditional. You can get it to look more like it. What else did I change on this? I apologize. I can't remember everything that I changed now. I guess we could compare the two, but I don't know that it's not necessarily that important. You can make it look more like Futura if you want it to, in terms of having more traditional characters on there. The other thing you'll probably note here is the dots on the I and J. You can see how they're slightly bigger than the stems there, but they're quite a bit bigger than the stems here. And that's just, once again, going to help out with your legibility and stuff like that. Let's go ahead and look at how others have solved this similar issue. So I don't know if it's necessarily something that needs to be solved, how others have evolved Futura. So like I said, Futura 100 by Type Together, this is meant to be as close and authentic to the original as possible. This is not trying to be an evolution. They're trying to do it exactly as Paul Renner did it 100 years ago in the 1920s. CMM Radio, as we've said, is an evolution, but there have been other evolutions before that. We had Avenir, which was Frutiger's, gosh, I hope I'm getting that right. I'm like 99% sure Avenir's Frutiger was supposed to be the more perfect version of Futura. And you can kind of see, if we have these three on the screen right now, you can see the geometric sands playing through, and you can see how there are a lot of very, very similar characteristics between the top and the bottom there. The red is CMM Radio. I'm going to get a drink while you look at these. But you can see how this was solved with Avenir. There are a lot of similarities, but it does solve a lot of the problems. You know, you've got those big splayed M at the points on the M, N, and A, and you can see that Frutiger's tone these down. You can see that the spacing of the widths of the letters are much more uniform. We saw this solved. Oh, look at that. There's a little crossbar in there. I always thought that that was just like the lowercase. Interesting. Okay, sidetracked. But you can see that Anna is solving the problems in somewhat similar ways with some of the characters. Definitely not exactly the same at all, because hers is a Futura made to be more inclusive, made to be updated for 2026, whereas Avenir was more of pushing away from it and trying to be a different kind of evolution. It's like they're evolving in two different directions. But you can see the R's are also another one, where you've got the stem, or the leg, I apologize, the leg of the R connecting to that top bowl, whereas with Futura, you've got that very distinct, almost meeting right at the joint. Not like ITC Avant-Garde, but pretty close to it, especially at smaller sizes. The last one I'm going to point out here is Gotham. So if I was going in order, I would go for evolution. I would go Futura, Avenir, and then Gotham. That's kind of how I think of this progression. You might have a different perspective on how you picture it, but you'll see that Gotham also solved a lot of these problems in similar ways. It's much wider, but its characters are much more uniform in the same way that that CMM Radio is. And I'll just point out before we move on here, the price tags on Futura, Avenir, and Gotham are multiples of what CMM Radio is going to cost you. So that's something to keep in mind. If you are interested in one of these three typefaces that we all know and love, I think you could have CMM Radio in mind as an alternate for these, because we've seen how unique and characterful it can be. And you can see when you stack these up together, you're getting some similar vibes and some similar solutions to the problems that Futura does have, you know, if you don't love all the quirks and stuff like that. Here are the italics. I don't know if this is super important, but I will note that CMM Radio is the only one of these four that does have an italic variable axis. Futura 100 does have an optical axis, which is great if you need that, but if you don't need that, you know, why pay way more for it? And why have the same font that everyone else has? Everyone uses Futura, everyone uses Avenir, everyone uses Gotham. You could be the one using CMM Radio. So that is going to be my review of this. Let me go ahead and show you the price tag. I've gone through all of this, showing you all the difference and details. I love doing these deep dives. I leave a comment and let me know if you guys like them. I like doing them. If you want them to be more brief, I can certainly make them more brief. Standard license on this one, but let me go ahead and show you the price here. Actually, you can see the whole license process here. You pick desktop, web, or app. That's what I say. When I say standard, that's what I can consider to be standard. Sometimes you can break them out. I'll still call it standard, but you can see here, two different options. You can get CMM Radio family. That's going to give you the two different styles. I apologize. That's going to give you static version of regular, static version of italic for 105, or you can get the variable for 105 on its own. I would go with the variable if you're a professional designer. Daryl says, not brief, go long. I appreciate you, Daryl. Thanks for the feedback. But yeah, so I would go for variable if you are a professional designer, if you have access to Affinity. Everyone has access to Affinity now. There are going to be use cases where you would prefer to have the statics, but variable fonts just make your life so much easier, having one font file to worry about if it makes sense. And then, you know, there is that super secret thing that we looked at in the beginning of this, where we get this hidden access of the weight. So these are not out yet, but they could be yours if you get the variable version. So I would assume that if you purchase this now, you'll probably get the updated license. Don't take my word for it, though. You have to ask. Anna, ask Comatype what that update is going to look like. Maybe there'll be a small charge. Maybe there won't be. But if you want some early access to the weight right here, I can't promise that this will still be available if you purchase this several months from now, because maybe this will be just completely disabled and taken out. But right now, if you want the extra weights for it and you want to put this to use, I would go for the variable for 105 euros. Just in context, you know, if you wanted to get the cheapest version of Futura 100, that's going to cost you like $510. So you're talking about 5 times more in price for Futura 100. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but it does have twice as many glyphs to it. You know, you're talking about a lot more language support. You're talking about optical sizes and things like that, but not everybody needs all of those. And I think CMM Radio just has some really, really fun stuff going on that I haven't seen in any other version of, you know, any other Futura inspired typeface. So that is that's going to be a wrap. Finally, on Comatype's CMM Radio. I'm really a fan of this one, if you haven't been able to tell. Let me go ahead and get to the last one here today. This one's going to be a little bit faster just because I'm not 100% sure what to make of this one. I was drawn in by these beautiful specimens. Let me go ahead and give the call out here. This is by Off-Type. Off-Type is the experimental side of Pangram. So this is Off-Type. It is Sector. This actually released on March 10th, so a couple of weeks ago now. But this is what it is. It's this Sector typeface. Let me get down to the bottom because I'll give you the real description, but you can probably see here. It's inspired by LCD screens, which you can immediately grasp if you ever played with, I don't know, before there was LCDs and Quartz LCD is what I'm trying to say. If you ever played with an old calculator or an old video game, you know, before handhelds were good, you might have picked one of these up at like at a store that had just like one game on it, and it was one of these Quartz LCD displays on it, and you would see all those background grids and stuff on there. That's what this is inspired by. I was drawn in by these cool specimens. I do think you can do some cool stuff with this. So let's just go ahead and look at it. I apologize. I was getting a drink of water. So here we are. Here is Sector. I don't want my initial reaction to like detract from this. I do think this is a cool typeface. I actually didn't get the glyph count on this. I apologize. But we could do it real quick. Let's just go ahead and do it. We'll give Wakamai Fondu a quick shout out here. I'm going to pull this up. Fonts. I guess you guys can see my whole workflow here. Fonts, Off-Type. Let's get into Sector here. You can see it's actually free for personal use. These Off-Type Foundry typefaces are. Let's choose. I want to do like regular fill. There we go. So this is the narrow fill. So this is how I see how many glyphs. You can see it's actually kind of pretty high. 696 glyphs on here, 418 characters, 21 layout features. That's pretty solid. That's pretty solid for a display typeface. I am surprised by that. Daryl's commenting in chat before we get too deep in this. Daryl says, my only concern with the universality of radio, let's go ahead and go back to radio real quick. My only concern with the universality of radio would be, does it work well with lots of groups of numerical data, especially in small print? That is a fair question that I did not look into too deeply, but it does have, let me go ahead and go back to this. It does have the tabular figures. So you can do like the 0 with the line through it. You can do that legible 9 if you wanted to. I think the normal one's fine, but it does have tabular. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not going to have the optical sizes that Futura 100 is going to have, but it does have that. You know what, though? She did do... Yeah, I mean, this is something we'd have to test out. Probably something for another time. But while we're here, she did do a small print size right here on the website. So I think you could check that out. I know those aren't numbers, but you can see like at small size compared to Futura. Probably not Futura 100 on there, but it looks similar in its legibility and stuff like that. I wouldn't say that it's extreme one way or the other, but you can see some small numbers on there. But yeah, I mean, Futura, small numbers, I'm not sure that that was the intended use case, but as a workhorse, I completely get your point that maybe it wouldn't work at those sizes. And just as an aside, for anybody that does chat, Daryl, I know you're the only one talking right now, but I am doing streaming in 4K now, so chat's a little bit slower. So I apologize if I get to them a little bit slow. I'll still hop back, even though we'd moved on to something else. So here's Sector, and you can see I've got the color font version of it on here. The color font version only comes in black and this gray color. It's actually probably black with opacity on it, but that grid there is not something that I put there. If we type something here, oops, we've got the caps lock on. You can see that that grid shows up as you type. That's what the color version is. I forget what we're calling this. Sector, there we go. Let me go ahead and show you the other styles of this before we move on. There's regular fill, so this is gonna have no grid on it. Try and zoom in on this a little bit more so we can see it. This is regular fill. It's just going to be the fill, and you can see the baseline is shifting. I'm not sure if that's a me problem. I've got it set to the top. Let's align it center and we'll see if maybe that helps. Regular fill, we're just going to have to deal with it. Regular colors, got that background grid on it. Regular grid, this is going to show you the full grid that's in the background there, and that's useful for this color font being stuck at black. Then we've got the regular rotalic. This is their italic. They're rotating the grid. I don't know that I love this, especially when we get into something like this. I cannot imagine when I would want to type out a font rotated like this. This feels so silly to me, but it is an experimental typeface, so I'm not going to hate on it, but imagine if you were using one and you were trying to do italics, like the grid is immediately broken. You can't put italics next to this grid. So I don't know how useful the rotalics are that they're calling them, but they do exist, and maybe one of you will find a use case for it. So there are the three different versions of that as well. So there are the regular fill, the color grid, the regular grid, and then there are the regular rotated, color rotated, and then the grid fill. Okay, let me show you how this works. It is a monospaced font, and you can see if we zoom in, let's go ahead and set this to the regular grid real quick so you can see what this looks like. Here's what the grid looks like. Bunch of circles, bunch of lines between them, and then they're, you know, for lack of a better, more elegant way to say this, they're coloring in the lines and creating typefaces out of it. This is something that's been done historically with stencils and stuff like that, but they're doing it here. As I said, this is inspired by Quartz LED displays, and you can see how that would apply. I think this is quite a bit more intricate than probably any Quartz LED that I've ever seen, but there it is, and it's monospaced, so you can see how these perfectly line up, and you can also insert a blank spot right there. I don't think that it would look great if you smash these all together. So there's no like spacing, the side bearings, you know, it stops at the grid. You got to leave the space between them. You could maybe space it out, you know, track it out or kern it out a little bit, but I think the defaults are probably there for a reason. You can start to see some of the limitations on this as well. This right here is a backslash. So if I was to do a fraction like 2 over 3, that's supposed to be the backslash. So you can start to see some of the limitations. There's no horizontal, or no like no diagonal line. There's no diagonal line that exists on this. So when you get to the diagonals that would be inside of the M and the N, you're getting these curves. I think that's fine on letters and stuff like that. But yeah, you know, you really have to come up with something creative to make a slash. I don't know that you're ever going to need a slash with a typeface like this. You're probably going to be doing something incredibly display oriented with this. You know, it's going to be a headline. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. But if you do need a slash, hopefully someone can interpret this as a slash. The last thing here, not the last thing, but the next thing here, I want to point it out that might be a little bit of an issue. This character right here is not an 8. this is an ampersand. Typically I stick my ampersand between the capital X or the capital Y and Z, like X, Y, and Z. But I wanted to show you how this was monospaced, so you could see the lowercase and uppercase alphabets stacked on top of each other, and they look nice and neat. Then I threw all these characters on there so you could see those. This is the ampersand though, so I think there could definitely be some issues with the 8 and the ampersand. Maybe not in context. I think they've done a decent job making that one. But, you know, there are going to be some legibility issues with this. It does come in a narrow version. And when I looked at this one, I was like, man, that's pretty narrow already. But it gets even narrower. And I kind of like the more narrow version even more. It's still perfect circles as far as I can tell. So it is still perfect circles. They're just making them skinnier. And you can see... Is the G the same? No, you can see they're actually quite a bit different. So if we compare the G here, see how it's nice and curved, meets out to the line there. When we get to this more narrow version, the G is chopped off. So you've got the circle at the top there. Okay, so that's how they're doing it. They're chopping off the circle. You still got perfect circles, but they're chopping off the outside of it, and then they're making it within that. That's really interesting. So the narrow version of it here, I think it's pretty neat. You could definitely push these much closer together because you are chopping off some of those round parts. But look how they solved the M and the N here. The M's got a little line going down. The N's doing kind of that slash thing that we saw before. Yeah, I mean, this is what you would have to do if you were working with a grid like this with the quartz LED. You'd have to make these kind of sacrifices to make it work. On top of that, we're working with monospaced, so they're all on the exact same grid. They don't get to cheat with this at all. The asterisk, that's kind of nice. I didn't even notice that before. But yeah, this is the pound sign right here. If you can't make it out between the @ symbol, it's going exclamation @ pound sign, and then the number, or I guess some of us might say hashtag these days, I guess. I think the hashtag works quite a bit better in the wide version. When you get down to the narrow, I don't know that I would ever recognize that as like a pound symbol, a number sign, or a hashtag. But again, when you're working in these constraints, you got to get creative. So I was going to show you this here. So it is, if I try to change this, let me go ahead and show you the narrow right here. So this is the color version. If I try to change this, you can see my color over here. I'm trying to change this to red. Nothing happens at all. That's because this is a color font, similar to how we looked at KTF Roman up here. Color fonts, you can't just change the color in here. You got to go use a specific tool to go change it. Someday I expect that'll change, but that day is not today. So if you try to change this color version with the grid on it, you cannot do it. You're just going to get black and then some opacity of black. Could you do like a color overlay and these weird types of things? You know, maybe. But I think the more realistic solution is to use two different fonts or two different styles. So you're going to use the grid version. You're just going to stick a grid in the background, and then you're going to put the standard regular version on top of it. You're going to do two layers like we used to do with layering fonts, and then you're going to change your colors in the background. So I've got this to like 10% opacity, but you can see how terrible it looks when it's really bright. These essentially, the green would be the LCDs that are turned off. So they should be really, really light. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. You get as wild as you want. This is the narrow version here. You can see the S is cut off there, and the C as well. You know, they're not perfectly round on the edges of them. But I mean, that's what you would have to do. You could change these background colors. Now we can change this to whatever we want. If we don't make this red, what's going on here? Let me go ahead and pick a swatch. That's a lot easier. If we do the red, and we set the opacity to 0, you'll be able to see I can change this color now to anything I want. And that's basically how you would have to do that. You can't use the color font version of it. You just have to do it like this. The thing that I saw them do on the website, that's not the website. Did I close? No, there it is. The thing I saw them do on the website was this right here where it says mono grid. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, you could stack these on top of each other. It's not quite that easy. You can even see on this one here, there's less space on the top than there is on the bottom. They've solved that problem by putting some typography on top of it, some text on top of it. I did not attempt to solve that problem. I just went ahead and put 2 lines of text here. I spaced them out so they would perfectly match the grid. So you can see this does perfectly match the grid from one to the other. That's not super hard to do. What is super hard to do is the fact that each one of these grids is made for one single character. So you get down to the bottom, you're like, okay, cool. Like my W still fits the bottom of that loop there. But then you get to the R and suddenly you're not on the same grid anymore. You get to the L and you're not on that same circular grid. Is anyone going to notice this? I mean, probably not, but we will. And we will know that this doesn't work. So I do think that you do have that issue. It's not quite as simple as it seems like it would be right here. Some characters might work better than others, but this is the narrow version, and you can't realistically put 2 lines of text on here like that, at least not easily. What you could do is go in, break this grid up. It is just repeating, so just chop it at one of these circles, I guess, and extend it further down the line. It's going to take a lot of extra manual work, but you know, I guess you wouldn't be typesetting too much stuff with this. Whoops, went way too far. So like I said, sector's not incredibly, I'm not going to do a super deep dive on this, but I can show you some of the features here. So they've got sharp diagonal glyphs here, so you can change some of these out. This is why there's so many glyphs. Because we are on the standard version right now, and you can swap out some of these. You can see like the U, V, W there, you can see it. You can see it in the M, you can see it in the capital A. We've got an alternate, it's supposed to be an alternate G. I'm not seeing it happen though. Oh, there it is. Okay, so you've got the alternate G, a little more stylized. That's kind of fun. I don't mind that, with the little ear on it. We've got an alternate U. Let's see. Yeah, because that U's looking kind of like a V when we use the alternate version of it. Yeah, I think the tail really does help differentiate, but if you weren't worried about the V and you really could have the context, I do think the perfectly smooth one looks a little bit better. Let's go ahead and see what else we got here. Oh, we've got the trident M, so you can have like a line coming straight down the M. You can see I didn't play around with these alternates very much. The font is already so wild. That just trying to wrap my head around it in general, got an alternate A. Trying to wrap my head around it in general was quite the effort. Yeah, so there's some interesting stuff going on here that I actually didn't look at before. You can get a /0 on this one. Ooh, I kind of like that /0. But yeah, you get what you get when you're working in these kind of constraints, and you have to get creative, and it's not going to be perfect. But that's, you know, that's the, I don't know what we would say, like that's the joy and the pain of this type of typeface. The joy is you've done something, you know, super unique, and it works in this grid, and it's really creative and fun and wild, and you can do crazy specimens like this that evoke, you know, the 80s and early 90s quartz LCDs, but it's not going to be usable in a lot of use cases where you really need legibility. Something like this though, it looks pretty cool. Okay, that is the last new typeface release. I'm not even sure, I didn't check the price. There it is, $320 US for the full collection for print. So they break these out a little bit more. Don't love that, but it is what it is. Let me go ahead and direct you to one final thing. I'm gonna go ahead and put my face back on the screen for this one. Am I on there? There I am. Hello world. I should say hello, Daryl. You're the only one here live right now. I appreciate you for hanging out. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about. This was a Herb Lubalin lecture series for the Type Cooper Union, and it was a conversation with Dan Vaughn. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. He spent time in Japan. And this is not something that I would have ever thought to look up, Japanese subtitles on movies, but it turned out to be an incredibly interesting conversation, presentation. I'll be honest though, for probably like the first, I'm covering him up a little bit, not too bad. For like the first 10 minutes of it, I was like, man, am I really going to sit through this? Like, I don't know. I'm not typically drawn to like, what do they call it? CKJ, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, typography. It looks cool, but I know that I'm probably never going to be able to understand it. I'm never going to be able to use it. But he does a pretty good job of breaking it down. But the story of this and the story about like, the fact that subtitles were still being written by hand up until like, I don't know, almost like 10 years ago in Japan for movies. was really interesting. There was this one guy that was doing it that was super prominent, and we needed the Harry Potter movies. He had specific subtitles and wrote them more creatively. I'm doing a terrible job explaining this, but it turned out to be a pretty interesting presentation about Japan's subtitles that are put on to movies in the cinema. These are only in the theater. These are not these don't exist on DVDs. That was the other like interesting quirk to this, is that these would only exist when you went to the movies. So you'd have to go to the movies and you could see them, and there's almost no record of these because of that. There's no archive of these because after the movies went out of the theater, regular fonts would be used for the subtitles on DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff like that. So most of this is lost to history. So it's really cool to get a glimpse of this. And will I ever do anything with this? Probably not. But now there is that seed planted in my brain of like, oh, this thing exists. And you never know what that might turn into. So that's why I'm recommending this for you. This link in the description as well. Cooper Union's character development with Dan Vaughn. Again, hopefully I'm saying Dan's last name right. I'm going to switch to my face cam and we will get out of here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I know we crammed quite a bit into this, and Daryl said he appreciates the deep dive, so I'm going to keep going with the deep dives. We'll go deep on those. Next episode is going to be on Friday. We'll be doing episode 43. I've already got some great stories for it. Like I previewed there, we've got Spinello, we've got Serica, two really cool typefaces, as you saw, with a ton of glyphs and a ton of features. We're going to do some deep dives on those. It's going to be really fun. And I think we'll do a deep dive on Panell, Display Panell, because the trial font for that one already has the full font on it. So that'll be a pretty easy one to hop into and do a deep dive on. But this is kind of the new format, you know, we kind of get through things quick. I'm going to give you some new releases, do the deep dives on ones that I already mentioned the week before. So if you see new releases and you want to see deep dives on those, let me know. And, you know, I'm happy to do that rather than just the ones that are most interesting to me. But that's going to be it for tonight. I appreciate everyone hanging out tonight, everyone watching the replays in the future. I have been Curtis Simpson. Daryl, you are very welcome. I've been Curtis Simpson. This was Typography News number 42, and I will see you guys on Friday. Bye.